Hi, game developers. Chris DeLeon here of GamKeto, and what I want to talk about today is the concept of a one-man band. And in particular, this relates, of course, to the idea of working on a team as opposed to doing everything yourself. I know, so when I was getting started making games, my first 10 years making games, I struggled to do it all myself. I insisted on I needed to do all my art, needed to do all my sound, all my level design, all my programming, all my everything. And it wasn't just because I was a control freak. It wasn't just I needed control over every little piece of it. It was that I thought that would be more impressive if I did it all myself. And the reason I raised the point of a one-man band is, in case, if you're not familiar with the idea of a one-man band, just to throw some visuals here, it's the kind of guy that they're playing a banjo, they have a drum on their back, they might be stepping on something to smash the cymbals, sometimes they'll have an accordion, they'll have some sort of harmonica or kazoo, or a flute, or a trumpet, or a bugle, or something held up in front of their face with a stick, and they're doing all these instruments at once to play music. And it is absolutely impressive that someone can do that, but not in a way that's going to impress anyone else to want that person to join their band. Does that make sense? And so if your goal is ever to make games professionally, whether it's as contract work, as a side hustle, making independent games, whether it's as your primary career, whatever it is, you need team experience. You're going to get better results out of it, and in fact, the games that result will be more impressive. And you have to think of it, you're not trying to impress people with how much of a load you carried. You're trying to impress people with the games that come out of it, right? And if you ever want to work with someone else, if you want to do game development contract for someone else, etc., they're going to want to know that you can compromise and share a vision, that you can work with others, that you can communicate your ideas, that you can document internal things as you work on a project in a way that helps other team members. And those are all things that come up in the process of working with a team that can't be had when making games completely alone. Does that make sense? And again, so in the case of a one-man band, yes, it's impressive that they're doing that, but it comes down to who are they trying to impress. Because if they're trying to impress friends and family, well then by golly, well, Joe has figured it out. Look at him go. Right? Playing all those instruments at once. But for anybody else out there, are they going to buy tickets to the one-man band? No. Are they going to get the t-shirt for the one-man band? No. Are they going to ask the one-man band to play at their social event? Probably not. Right? If they have a song they want performed, they're going to go to the one-man band? Of course not. They're going to go to a real band. A team. And the results that come out of teamwork are inevitably just so much better than the kind of things that we struggle to do alone. It takes less work, and you get better results when you make games with a team. And that's because even if you have the skill set to do all the level design, all the sound, all the art, all the code, everything all together, even if that's the case, when your attention is split between all of those things, you're doing an inferior job of all of them. Even if you take two people, each of whom could be doing design or programming, etc., and you pair them up so each can focus on just one piece for this project, so one person really throws their attention at making sense out of how do we do levels well for this game? What does it mean for a good level to exist in this game? And they solve that problem without being distracted by how do I optimize our algorithms? How do I make our game support these basic features? You're going to get better levels out of that result, and the whole game's going to show better. On the other side of the spectrum, it's also true where the person who's worrying about just focusing on how do I make this engine as good as this can be for what we need it to do for this specific game, without being distracted by, special features for certain kinds of levels, not being distracted by what are the actual level layouts, being able to trust someone else to deal with that allows them to spend less time, less energy, and still get better results out of it. It's an all-around win. So my GamKeto Club, just as an example where there's people worldwide making games together as teams, it's part of why the thing exists. One of our members, she was interviewing for a position at Naughty Dog at last GDC. And for that interview, they asked her questions about, she's looking at kind of narrative, writing, creative direction kind of roles. And she was able to talk about specific cases where on her teams she had to adapt her narrative vision for things to what our programming could do, to what the real-time engine could do, to the different design constraints that we were up against. And that was a much more grounded, realistic, good conversation to have in that kind of interview environment than simply saying like, hey, I have a script. I had this idea. Or even than to have said, I made this whole little game alone, but instead of being able to focus on just the writing portion, I was spreading myself thin on also doing all the programming, all the level design, all of the art and everything else. Does that make sense? If you want to work on a team in the future professionally, if you want to do contract work professionally, if you want to do any of these things, it's incredibly valuable to also have team experience where you find people to work with. So GameKeto Club is one of many different ways to find those people. It's an option that, of course, I endorse because that's why I created it. I think it serves a need. But there's lots of other options out there, right? This is what a lot of people, the real value a lot of people get from something like a graduate school program in game design is connecting to other students who are doing it. A lot of the value people get from computer science degrees, at least in the case of people who go into games, is getting put in the same context of being able to find team members who are serious about it. And I say find team members who are serious about it because I know one of the other challenges that can come from finding people to work with on a team, right? I know certainly one of my first experiences working on a team, I remember I tried doing international stuff very early on at a young age. And I was trying to make a game with this guy who was up in, I think, Norway. And he was doing the game code. I was doing the art and the level design. And it was kind of like a Bomberman style game. And about, at least in my assessment as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid or whatever, about 70%, 80% through the project, he lost all the source code. Hard drive failed. He didn't have backups. So that was it. Didn't matter that I had done the other art for our 3D characters and for our bomb effects and for our tiles. Didn't matter I designed multiple kinds of levels and come up with new kind of power-ups and that we'd built all the assets for this stuff. None of it mattered because our code was lost. And so the game couldn't ever continue. And that really burned me. That really just like, okay, well, I've learned my lesson. Now I have to make games alone. And it wasn't until some years later that I helped start my first club, Game Creation Society at Carnegie Mellon, that I really realized the value of, well, heck, as long as you are with people you can trust, and as long as you know a little bit in advance to look out for things like, hey, do we have remote backup of our source code? Is there any one machine that could fall in the puddle and ruin this whole project? No? Then we're good. Right? And it doesn't take that much anymore, right? I mean, it could be as simple as heck, if it comes down to it, put a zip on a Dropbox or on a Google Drive folder. But even better, right? Of course, stuff like GitHub exists for a reason, or Tortoise SVN, or lots of good repository options out there. But the point being that I've heard too many stories of people who they've tried working with a team, but the team was like their neighbor, or the team was their brother-in-law they talked into it, right? Or their team was just someone else who really was not feeling it, who was kind of maybe even being kind of forced or pushed into it. And that just doesn't work, right? It doesn't work for the same reason why you can't just go to your friend and be like, hey, you want to join the soccer team with me? It's a pretty major commitment. You need someone who cares about it. You need someone who's serious about, like, they want to get out of it what you want to get out of it. And odds are good that there's just not a ton of those people around. So that's part of why we have these structures like the graduate school programs, like my GameKeto Club, to try to help connect people to teams of people who mean it, people who are there to build things, people who take it seriously, and people who know how to look out for each other in terms of keeping up their end of the bargain, in terms of not just losing things, etc. So anyway, that's it for now. Build games on teams. Don't try to be the one-man band. There can be some real value early on when you're getting started doing a few projects solo so you can get an appreciation of the big picture and how the pieces fit together. But as your work advances, it's really going to take off to new heights and new directions as you begin doing teamwork. Now, speaking of which, one other aspect of teamwork that I love, and I can't believe I've waited this long in this video to remember to mention it, is this idea that different people you work with will bring out different aspects of your work. It'll pull it new in different directions. Some of my favorite work I've done, just even within like a span of years, has come from being paired up with different artists, being paired up with different designers, being paired up with different programmers, musicians. And in each case, it's just like it's like an expansion pack, right? Or DLC or whatever, where it just takes your work and their work, smashes them together, and they grow in completely different ways than you've ever seen your work go before, because of who it's bouncing off of, because of whose lens it's going through on the way out to the world. And so that's part of the fun, too, of when you learn to work with a team, you begin to rapidly diversify the kind of things you can build by virtue of who you can build them with, which is part of the fun of it. So anyway, getting excited again. So Chris DeLeon here for GameKeto. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to playing the games that you're going to build in the future with teams, with your friends, family, with people that you find online, maybe with people with GameKeto Club, maybe with me.